is on your guys' social media?
So we will have a formal video talking about immigration enforcement and what that looks like. You know what? Since this has started with this new administration, there's a lot of fear in our community, and there's also a lot of misinformation that's being shared. And so I want to kind of clear up where local law enforcement fits in to immigration. And I think it's important for people to understand is our immigration policies here in Ventura County for not just the sheriff's office, but all the police agencies hasn't changed since 2017. 2017, Senate Bill 54 was passed by our state legislature and signed by Governor Brown that basically limited what law enforcement could do as it relates to immigration enforcement. So none of our officers or deputies will be doing any field immigration enforcement. They're not going to be doing raids in businesses, homes, churches, schools, etc. as it relates to immigration. The only time that we'll communicate with immigration authorities is if somebody's in my custody in our jail and they've been arrested and held to answer or convicted of certain serious or violent crimes. And in those circumstances, we run through a process to make sure that they qualify under the new Senate Bill 54 rules. And then if they do, we let ICE know, hey, this person's going to be getting out tomorrow or today. And it's up to them to come get them. Beyond that communication, we have nothing else to do with immigration authorities. So, you know, we're not a sanctuary county as far as the sheriff's office is concerned because we comply with SB 54.
Right.
There are a few counties that don't comply. But, you know, clearly we have some people in our community that are harming other community members that I'm comfortable letting ICE pick up. You know, if you're convicted of a serious or violent felony, you're obviously creating harm to our community, and immigration is potentially going to come get you. Now, one of the challenges is, you know, I know there's community members that don't want me to communicate with ICE at all. But when I've talked to ICE about what that looks like, I said, what if I didn't? They said, well, we'll just go into the community and we'll grab them and anybody else we can too. So it literally is a benefit to the community that they come and get them from me while they're in my custody rather than when they're released to the community, because it'll keep immigration from going into the community itself.
Yeah, and you know, I'm glad you're talking about it because you know, a lot of people get misinformed, especially with social media. Like, you know, I've been seeing a lot of posts from people just saying like, hey, they're over here, hey, they're over here. It's false information. But, you know, a lot of people too try to avoid, you know, whether it's the local police, the local sheriff, you guys are just doing your job. And at the same time, it's not like you guys are out there like, I don't want to say snitching, but you know.
Well, like I said, we're not even permitted to communicate with immigration at all. So we're not notifying immigration of who to look for or where to go at all. Our job is strictly about community safety and enforcing the laws of the state of California. That's where we fit in. That's what we're continuing to do. I received an anonymous letter the other day saying that this person was stopped and it was by a deputy when they had a Border Patrol agent with them in the car, which I know is nonsense because we'd never do that. We would never let Border Patrol ride with us, and we would never ask people's immigration status. Not only is it against our policy, it's against the law here in California. So if that in fact happened and somebody wants to share the date and time of where it actually occurred so I can prove it, then we'll have some discipline issues that we'll take care of internally. But I'm confident it did not happen. I think that's just misinformation that is being spread. And I think on social media, when people say, hey, I saw this person got stopped or whatever, you know, we stop cars all the time. And for speeding, reckless driving, you know, not stopping completely, all of the above. And we're going to ask people for their driver's license, registration, and proof of insurance. That's the only documentation we're asking for.
I'm glad you're here too, and speaking and telling us the way you do get involved. And that's, you mentioned it earlier, when they get released and they don't have the documents, that's when you guys get involved, right? Only people that you guys have in custody, right?
Correct. So what'll happen is if somebody gets arrested, immigration authorities, because we fingerprint everybody, would be maybe know that, hey, that's who we want to look at. They would reach out and say, we want to place a hold on this person. Well, we no longer respond to detainers. That was what they used to call it, and they still actually call it, but we don't respond to detainers any longer. We're no longer allowed per SB 54. So what they'll say is, hey, we're interested in this person. Then we look at it to make sure that person qualifies for us to be able to communicate with them. And so there are a lot of nuances to that. The charges, whether they're a felony, they could be wobblers, and there's a list of charges that qualify. Not all charges qualify. And once we determine that they qualify, we communicate with the public defender's office, who have experts in this as well. We say, hey, we believe this person qualifies based on this criteria. Here's the information we have. They look at it and they say, yep, we agree with you. Then we make the notification to immigration saying, yes, this person qualifies. And then, okay. And then the next time they hear from us is when the person's about to get out, and we'll say, this person's being released. It's okay, and it's up to them to come to get them. And when we release them, they walk out the door. Immigration is waiting for them up in the lobby. If they're not there, the person walks out and leaves.
Yeah.
If immigration's there, then it's up to them to take that person into custody.
Yeah, and I think too, conversations at least that I've had with people asking me questions, I tell them, look, the laws about it or anything about it, but I think a lot of people in the community too, like they see a uniform and they think the worst right away, especially in a situation like this. Like, you know, they can't like
Differentiate.
differentiate from a border patrol or you know, an officer.
Yeah, it's very difficult depending on the uniform that they're wearing. Obviously, all of our deputies wear uniforms that say sheriff on them. We do have our special enforcement units that are typically wearing plain clothes, so jeans and a flannel, and then they have a vest that they throw over that says sheriff on it, so ours are more easily marked. I know that when I've seen pictures of ICE, they have vests that say police and then ICE below it. You know, that's how they identify themselves with their vests. What's important though for the community to remember is to not be afraid to call local law enforcement. If they're the victim of a crime, if they see something they're concerned about, call 911. We're going to show up. We're not going to ask anybody their immigration status. That is not our responsibility. That is the federal government's responsibility. So we want people to feel safe here in our community. And if we have people who are afraid to call because they've been a victim of a crime, all we've done is create a group of people who are now victims perpetually. Right? We can't have an area of our community where just they're constant victims because they're afraid to call us. That's why it's important to have that separation. Immigration is going to do their job. They have a role to do. It's strictly a federal obligation that we will not interfere with, but it's not for us to do either.
Now, you guys, you know, being in the 805, and you know, I don't want to call them outsiders because they're doing their job. But do you guys get a lot of questions like, how come you guys aren't stopping this or
I was in a meeting last night, actually. That was one of the questions, like, what's our plan to keep them out of here? And there is no plan. We can't keep them out of here. They are the federal government. They have a role that is strictly the federal government's to do, which is immigration enforcement. So we can't stop them. If we stop them, we would be in danger of being arrested for, for interfering.
Yeah, it's like everyone's doing their job. And again, we were talking a little bit off air. Like my grandparents both, you know, they came here back in the days, and you know they did their job to fix their papers and everything. We said how hard that is nowadays too, like for people to do that.
It's becoming much more challenging for people to get status.
Yeah,
right? That's one of the things that has changed, is the difficulty in getting status. I'm no immigration attorney, so I don't know what the process is to even begin that. But for what we're dealing with currently, you know, it's important for people to have a plan, right? This is one of the things we talked about last night. Is the family's got to have a plan. If the parents are not here legally, and maybe the children are, and they're at school, and if the parents get picked up, there's got to be a plan.
Yeah.
Who's going to pick up the kids? Are they on the school roster? Do they have them on the form there for emergency contact so they can pick them up? Because if they're not on that list, they're not picking up those kids, right? I mean, the school's only going to release them to authorized people. So it's an opportunity for the community to start coming up with a plan in the event they are, in fact, held by the federal authorities.
Yeah, and you know what? We're gonna be talking a little bit more. And if you have any questions, make sure you get at us, Mambo on the radio. Send us a DM, and we'll get it here to Sheriff Jim Fryhoff, who's hanging out with us. We got more with him coming up.